But we do have somebody here with us, Katrina Pierson, who is a spokesperson for the Trump campaign, and she is joining us now. Good to see you, Katrina.
Good to see you.
How do you feel Donald Trump did tonight?
I think Mr. Trump did a fantastic job. For him to get up there on the national stage for the very first time, I think he did a fantastic job. I think the moderator did a great job. I think they both had equal time and plenty of opportunity to defend themselves and to respond when necessary, and I think he did a great job.
You know, something that got a lot of traction on social media was the fact that whenever he talked about President Obama, he always said, "Your president." Don't you find that sort of language a lot of people are saying was pretty divisive? Why did he choose to use that?
Well, I think anything Donald Trump says, particularly on social media, you're going to find a problem with.
But why did he? Was it a tactic that the strategist in your camp decided to do?
Oh, no, not at all. This was just Mr. Trump responding to Hillary Clinton. It's very important for him to make sure that the record was clear on a number of issues, whether it be the Iraq War or even the birther issue.
But why, I'm asking specifically, why did he say "your president" when referring to President Obama?
Well, I wasn't in his head, but you can ask him when you talk to him. But there was no negative connotation implied. He was just saying, you know, that was your president that did it.
But does he not think that President Obama is his president?
Oh, of course he does. Of course he does. Of course he thinks it's his president. It was just his way of expressing the feeling, particularly because he was being blamed for something he did not start.
All right, as we near the top of the hour here, I just want to reintroduce our panel. Rick Davis is here along with Liz Smith and Leslie Sanchez, and we're also joined by Trump campaign spokesperson Katrina Pierson. Katrina, again, a couple of things that Mr. Trump said on the debate stage tonight, is specifically with regards to stop and frisk. Now, he's made concerted efforts over the last couple of weeks to reach out to minorities, to the African American community, but he talked about stop and frisk, and he let's play a little bit of that sound for our viewers, and then we'll talk about it.
Well, I'm talking about taking guns away from gangs and people that use them, and I really don't think you disagree with me on this, if you want to know the truth. I think maybe there's a political reason why you can't say it, but I really don't believe. In New York City, stop and frisk, we had 2,200 murders, and stop and frisk brought it down to 500 murders. 500 murders is a lot of murders. Hard to believe. 500 is like supposed to be good. But we went from 2,200 to 500, and it was continued on by Mayor Bloomberg, and it was terminated by current mayor.
All right, Katrina, so Donald Trump saying that the murder rate went down because of stop and frisk. Almost all analysis that's been done of stop and frisk has proven that it did not work. It was then proven unconstitutional, and you didn't hear it in that soundbite, but then Donald Trump went on to say that the murder rate in New York City is back up. The NYPD saying that's simply not true. Why did he say that?
Well, the FBI just released a report today as well saying that it is true, in fact, by 10%. And I think
the murder rate in New York City is up 10% since the end of stop and frisk, but he said murders.
Well, we can look at numbers, we can look at murders, we can look at crime, but the fact is, and he was speaking specifically about Chicago. He mentioned
said New York City.
He mentioned what happened in New York, but then he was talking about Chicago. And what we know about Chicago specifically, because this is the community he's talking about, is that when Chicago had stop and frisk, and then they got rid of it, the police were complaining there was too much paperwork, crime dropped back, and now we have a serious problem in Chicago.
But 250,000 people who were picked up in Chicago were black. Overwhelmingly
you know what?
black.
I agree with you.
And the thing is, none of them had a gun on them when they were pulled over. And that's why people in Chicago are saying it didn't work for our city.
Absolutely.
So why would it work for anywhere else in America?
The reason why he's talking about this issue is because we have a very serious problem in America, but nobody ever wants to talk about why. We don't ask the question,
but I'm not talking about why. I want to know
it matters why, because this is where we are today.
Stop and frisk?
Because it actually did work in New York
But it
City.
didn't work in New York, and it didn't work in Chicago. The tangible, I'm talking empirical evidence here.
There's
about
evidence
pulling
that supports the other side, just like everything else. But we have to get down to why, because that's why we're here today. We're here because you have two candidates who have very different views. The reason why we have this problem, and the reason why stop and frisk was even implemented, is because there were disparities with regard to who people were pulling over. And this profiling, criminal profiling, not necessarily racial profiling, even though it comes across that way, but the reason why we have it is because we had the First Lady of the United States who went out on the national stage and dehumanized young black children. She called them super predators. She said they had no conscience and they need to be brought to heel. 3 years after that, during the Columbine shootings, these two kids were called students. And there was a speech given that we have to do more for our children so they don't resort to violence. This has been conditioning of the American public where black children have been demonized. Hillary Clinton owns that. Now we have a serious problem. This has gone on for decades. Donald Trump is trying to come up with a solution. Why? Because we have people in these communities
but
who want help.
But the solution he's coming up with, people saying, just doesn't work. It's been tried in multiple cities in America, and it's just flat out.
It was also ruled
work.
unconstitutional. I think, and as Rita is pointing out, almost every analysis that's been done, impartial analysis of stop and frisks, has proven that it does not work. You said, when Rita asked you the question about why Mr. Trump referred to President Obama as your president to Hillary Clinton, you couldn't get inside his head. But you're telling me, in this situation, when he was clearly saying New York City, murders had gone up in New York City, you're saying he's talking about Chicago. So I think a lot of people, when they look at the Trump campaign...
He was making an analogy there.
Okay.
And you can bring Mayor Rudy Giuliani and have this question. I mean, he was the man that actually implemented it. I was not the mayor at that time, but I will tell you that there have been guns taken off the street, many guns. Even though there were a lot of people who didn't have guns, there were those that did. We do have a serious problem in this country with gangs in the inner cities, and no one's doing anything about it.
So the question that I was going to ask, which is, you know, in many instances, and as we heard tonight, Donald Trump is faced with empirical evidence that is unbiased, and he says to the contrary. For example, Lester Holt questioned him on his support of the Iraq War, and he said that that's not true. And in fact, it is. We actually have, do we have that sound of Donald Trump on the Howard Stern show?
No, we don't, but you know what we have? We actually have a soundbite we want to talk about Clinton and stamina.
Well, hold on just one second. I want to address your question on the Iraq War. That was 2002. It was a radio interview. When someone asks you a question and you say, I guess so, with no information, that's not support of a war. It was an I guess so. It was after the fact when he was adamantly opposed to it. And keep in mind, Donald Trump never voted to send troops anywhere. He never voted on any policy at all in his entire life. He was against the Iraq War. Just because he said, well, I guess so, on a radio show, you can't use that and hold him responsible for sending people
Katrina,
into war.
We do know he's very good friends with Fox News, former Fox News chairman Roger Ailes. If he felt very passionately about being against the war in Iraq, he could have easily gotten on any program on Fox News. And
Sean Hannity.
Been running that soundbite.
He was on Sean Hannity.
He was on Sean Hannity years after the war, the invasion of the U.S.
But he
war.
had been talking about this. And I'll tell you something else. Donald Trump, again, has never voted for any war. And even if he had been adamantly supporting the war, which he wasn't, he had no access to intelligence, no access to any of these committee hearings. He had the access that many of us had through the media.
Well, he wasn't official, but he did have access to the airways, and clearly he made his statement that he was for the war at that time.
No, I guess so does not mean I support invasion of a country.
Katrina, we're going to have to leave it at that.
Katrina, we're going to have to leave it there.